Welcome to episode 8 of Michael Reads from a Book, the series in which Michael reads from a book. Today's selection is Alan Weisman's The World Without Us, a book that questions what would happen if humanity was to suddenly disappear. We're going to be reading from Chapter 3, The City Without Us. The notion that someday nature could swallow whole something so colossal and concrete as a modern city doesn't slide easily into our imaginations. The sheer titanic presence of a New York City resists efforts to picture it wasting away. The events of September 2001 showed only what human beings with explosive hardware can do, not crude processes like erosion or rot. The breathtaking, swift collapse of the World Trade Center towers suggests more to us about the attackers than about mortal vulnerabilities that could doom our entire infrastructure. And even that once inconceivable calamity was confined to just a few buildings. Nevertheless, the time it would take nature to rid itself of what urbanity has wrought may be less than we suspect. In 1939, a World's Fair was held in New York. For its exhibit, the government of Poland sent a statue of Laszlo Jagiel. The founder of the Białowieża Puszcza had not been immortalized in bronze for preserving a chunk of medieval forest 6 centuries earlier. By marrying its queen, Jaello had united Poland and his Duchy of Lithuania into a European power. The sculpture portrays him on horseback following his victory at the Battle of Grunwald in 1410. Triumphant, he hosts 2 swords, captured from Poland's latest vanquished enemy, the Teutonic Knights of the Cross. In 1939, however, the Poles weren't faring so well against some of those Teutonic Knights' descendants. Before the New York World's Fair ended, Hitler's Nazis had taken Poland, and the sculpture couldn't be returned to its homeland. 6 sad years later, the Polish government gave it to New York as a symbol of its courageous, battered survivors. The statue is placed in Central Park, overlooking what is today called Turtle Pond. When Dr. Eric Sanderson leads a tour through the park, he and his flock usually pass the statue without pausing, because they are lost in another century altogether, the 17th. Bespectacled under his wide-brimmed felt hat, a trim beard graying around his chin, and a laptop jammed in his backpack, Sanderson is a landscape ecologist with the Wildlife Conservation Society, a global squadron of researchers trying to save an imperiled world from itself. At its imperiled. I was thinking imperial because of squadron and Star Wars. Moving on. As its Bronx Zoo headquarters, Sanderson directs the Manhattan Project, an attempt to recreate, virtually, Manhattan Island as it was when Henry Hudson's crew first saw it in 1609. A pre-urban vision that transcends or that attempts speculation about how a post-human future might look. His team had scoured original Dutch documents, colonial British military maps, topographic surveys, and centuries of assorted archives throughout town. They've probed sedimentary, analyzed fossil pollens, and plugged thousands of bits of biological data into imaginary software that generated 3-dimensional panoramas of the heavy wooded wilderness in which a metropolis was juxtaposed. With each new entry of a species of grass or tree that is historically confined in some part of the city, the image grows more detailed, more startling, more convincing. Their goal is a block-by-city-block guide to this ghost forest, the one Eric Sanderson uncannily seems to see even while dodging Fifth Avenue buses. When Sanderson wanders through the Central Park, he's able to look beyond the 500,000 cubic yards of soil hauled in by the designers, Frederick Law Olmsted and Calvert Vaux, to fill in what was mostly a swampy bog surrounded by poison oak and sumac. He can trace the shoreline of the long, narrow lake that lay along what is now 59th Street, north of the Plaza Hotel, with its tidal outlet that meandered through salt marsh to the East River. From the west, he can see a pair of streams entering the lake that drained the slope of Manhattan's major ridge line, a deer and mountain lion trail known today as Broadway. Eric Sanderson sees water flowing everywhere in town, much of it bubbling from underground, which is how Spring Street got its name. He's identified more than 40 brooks and streams that traverse what was once a hilly, rocky island. The Algonquin tongue of its first occupants, the Lenni Lenape, Mannahatta refers to these now vanished hills. When New York's 19th century planners imposed a grid on everything north of Greenwich Village, the jumble of original streets to the south being impossible to unsnarl, they behaved as if topography was irrelevant. Except for some massive, unusable schist outcrops in Central Park and at the island's northern tip, Manhattan's texture was squashed and dumped into stream beds, then planed and leveled to receive the advancing city. And this has been another edition of Michael Reads from a Book. Thanks for listening.